Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Chris Nicholson. We're here to talk about Better Call Saul, which is in its sixth and final season. This week was episode 4 of the final season. Um, I usually do these radio and TV podcasts, radio and TV and movie podcasts with my friend Rob Henderson. He does not like Better Call Saul. He liked Breaking Bad, but he said he tried to get Better Call Saul. He tried to get into it, and he didn't like it. And I think he's sort of crazy for that. But I can't force him to watch. So I've replaced him with an old friend of mine for this show named Chris Nicholson, and we're gonna try to do this regularly. We're going to try to cover the episodes week by week, and we're going to start here by sort of talking about the Breaking Bad and the Saul universes, and maybe making the case for people as to why they should be watching this show. Chris, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks.
So this is your first time doing any kind of radio or like a podcast or anything like that, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
I've always thought about doing a podcast, but just never got around to it.
Okay, cool. Well, me and you, we know each other. It's a very interesting story. So we were law students at the same time. In the summer of 2011, we were both 1Ls, which is what we call first years in law school. And we worked at a Washington, D.C. Public interest firm called the Center for Individual Rights. And you and I were the only two interns there, although I think somebody joined later. But basically, we were we were basically doing, it's Center for Individual Rights. It's obviously a conservative public interest. It argued the Michigan affirmative action cases, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Grutter and Grad, was it both of them? Well, one or both of them?
Yeah, I think it was both of them, and it was the Commerce Clause case. I think Morrison.
Oh, really? Okay. They did Morrison too. Okay. So yeah, a very small but important firm. And it's interesting because that's when I started thinking about the civil rights stuff and around law school. And I learned, well, oh my goodness, all this stuff is interesting. And this has been my interest ever since then. And this is why, I'm doing a lot of writing on this today. I think it's important. Chris, we were interested in the same issues. We had talks, we had lunch every day. And we recently reconnected after, about a decade or so. So if anyone out there you want to reconnect with, there's no time like the present. And what will you say anything else, Chris, about, who you are and what you do?
I went to law school. And right after law school finished, I started a PhD in philosophy. I have taken a winding path through the PhD. Basically, I'm not a big fan of academia. That's something you and I share. So I've taken a break from the PhD. I've been writing some stuff and basically trading stock too. But now I'm finishing up the PhD.
Same path. Yeah, same path as me. JD, PhD, and then other stuff. And it's not on purpose that Rob is half Asian and I replaced him with you, who are also half Asian. That just happened to be.
I know that you care deeply about diversity and representation.
We had to keep the demographic balance. No, you're actually the person I want to talk to about this. You're not a token. Don't worry. So we both like this show. I like everyone I know watched Breaking Bad pretty much. Very few didn't. And then of those who watched Breaking Bad, if I ask them, do you watch Saul? It's about maybe a half to, or much less, maybe a third. And me, you and I both really like this show. And what would you like if you had to make a pitch to somebody, if you're just sitting there talking to your friend and they liked Breaking Bad and for whatever reason they never tried Saul or couldn't get into it, what would you tell them?
So I guess what I'd say is, first of all, if you just like the drug stuff, you still get that. And in fact, you maybe get it even a little bit better than you did in Breaking Bad. Like, you get a deeper look into the cartel scene, the crime. A lot of it is basically the backstory of Mike. And there's another character who's pretty good, Nacho. And you see more of the Salamanca family. So, if that's what you liked about Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
that's still, a third to a half of the show in Better
By the
Call
way, there's
Saul.
gonna be I should have said this at probably the beginning, but there's gonna be a lot of spoilers here. We're not holding anything back. So if like we convince you to watch it and then like, you listen to the rest of the podcast, it'll ruin it. So maybe if you're convinced, just go watch it and put this away for a while. But
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was deliberately avoiding a little spoiler right there.
No, okay. So yeah, this part don't give any spoilers. But after you're done making your pitch, that then
Yeah.
then we'll get
So,
into
so
it.
that's half of it. It's got all the same cartel drug trade stuff you like from Breaking Bad, except maybe even a little better. Uh,
Mm.
it introduces a new Salamanca, Lalo, and I think that most people think that he's the best Salamanca. And a lot of people, you got to wait a few seasons to get Lalo Salamanca introduced. But once he's in the show,
Okay, I
man,
think I think you're giving away spoilers. I'm sorry, Chris, but this is like when you introduce a new character. Like I don't want to know ahead of time how important they're going to be, right? Mike, okay, we know Mike is important.
all
Uh,
right, all right.
and
Uh,
Nacho, is important from the start. Uh, well, anyways, by the time you get to that, you're going to forget because it's a few seasons into it. So just yeah, go ahead. Be careful with the spoilers. I like to think how the way
all
how
right.
I understand what spoils something and what doesn't. So go ahead.
All right, so I'll speak in generalities then.
Yeah.
So the drug part is better, but the other half of it is just, the same Breaking Bad kind of storyline. Breaking Bad, you watch Walt slowly go bad. Here, the gimmick is now you get to watch Saul become Saul. And this part, you know, basically, I think part of the appeal of this part is that Saul, before he becomes Saul, is actually, in some ways, a more compelling character than Walt is because Walt, there's not that much good in Walt to begin with. I think that's my
Hmm.
opinion.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
but there's more good in Saul, and so there's more for him to lose.
Hmm. So Walt, I think was Walt ever good? He cared about his family, right? He didn't cheat on his wife. Was there at the start? Was there anything heroic or noble in him? When you put it like maybe not, maybe he's just I think you make it good. Like we see him go bad, but is he ever good?
Yeah,
Like
it's more like you see the false humility or the self effacement. It's more like it's not quite like Saul actually becomes bad. It's more like he becomes himself during
Mhm.
that show.
Yeah, yeah. You're saying Walt
Yeah.
becomes his. Right. Okay. Okay. So from now on, we're not going to hold back with any spoilers for Breaking Bad or Saul. So go watch if you need to. Yeah. The so yeah, that's interesting. Now Jimmy, well, Jimmy is okay. So Jimmy is a crook at the start. Walter is at least not that. Right. So if you're comparing them, you're giving them like a total score of morality, right? Um, so yeah, why isn't why isn't Walter better? At least not a scam artist.
Well, I mean, if you just measure kind of goodness by crimes committed,
It's a univariate
no,
analysis. Yeah.
from like a utilitarian point of view, if that's the view you take, then I mean, yeah, Jimmy's like a small time crook from the beginning. Walt is a
Uh-huh.
chemistry teacher.
Yeah.
But as far as like how much they care about other people, uh, random acts of kindness, that kind of thing. There's
Yeah.
more kindness in Jimmy the whole
Yeah.
way through. Walt has a lot of pride. That's one of his defining characteristics. You know, if you just look back at the whole series, even at the beginning, you can ask, when did Walt ever do something that was selfless? And maybe there's a few times, but not many.
Yeah. Except for family, which is
Yeah,
like
and for
arguably
Jesse.
for Jesse. Yeah. So it's a very small constricted space of sort of people he cares about. He hasn't expanded the circle in the Peter Singer sense. He has a very constrained circle, very primitive kind of understanding. Like four people, five people. He even hates his in-laws. Like he hates Hank for like not a really good reason. Like Hank is sort of annoying. And I think he's actually a good character in the end. But Walt hates him. Just because I don't know, he's just too boisterous, and maybe he just steps on his feet, and that's basically it. And yeah, there's no like Well, the weird thing about Walter is I'm wondering why he became a chemistry teacher. So you remember that scene where he's talking to those other guys and they're like, "Oh, they didn't do the startup together." So it seems like he was always much smarter, or he could have done a lot more than just be a high school teacher. And he has like a lot of pride, and he's like angry at these people who like ended up like making it big, and he didn't,
Right.
and he's just making so like what, but like he never expresses like I'm passionate. I love my. He is sort of passionate about chemistry, right? He like really gets into it, but he knows the students are idiots. Like he doesn't like he doesn't think he's not like an inspiring. He's like inspired by this stuff, but he doesn't have any delusion that like he's gonna make them love it, right? These public school kids in New Mexico. Um, why does he become a teacher in the first place? Do we have any idea as to
Well,
that?
it's the story of how and why he leaves Gray Matter, right? So that's the company. He's kind of co-founding it with Gretchen and Elliot. And my memory is a little hazy, but I think Walt was dating Gretchen at the
Mm,
start of that process. Uh, there was some fallout between them, and then she got with Elliot instead. Uh,
uh-huh.
and I think this part I may be wrong about, but the fallout might have been that Gretchen came from like this wealthy, privileged family, and
Uh,
Walt always felt insecure about being with her. Uh,
uh,
so then Gretchen got with Elliot, and then I think the story goes that was part of what caused Walt to basically sell his shares in the company at the very beginning, sell them very cheap. And so then there's a scene later on in the series where he reveals like that every week he checks up on the share price, and so
uh,
he's always resented missing out on that opportunity.
okay. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I'm also going off hazy memory. The series ended around 2012, and I've watched a clip here and there, but I haven't gone back and watched it. For Saul, the final season, I did recently rewatch season one, season two, and then like the first episode of season three, and then a couple in season five. Just so I'm going into this final season knowing and remembering a lot. Um, the so Jimmy, I think is he a good is he a good person at the start? I think here's my lesson from these two shows, and I think they both have a very similar sort of thing that the producer is trying to tell you about the world. And I think he's trying to tell you that the correlation between being a good person and being likable and being charismatic and being somebody that other people want to be around, it's a pretty weak correlation, if not a negative one. So Jimmy and Walt, like I watched the first few episodes of Saul, the first few seasons of Saul, and he's a crook, and he's always he becomes a lawyer, but he becomes a lawyer and he like has contempt for ethics, right? This is the interesting thing. So like, it's so brilliant because I go back and I watch it again, and you barely notice it the first time you watch it. Like he's cutting a corner here, he's cutting a corner there. He's fabricating some evidence. He's lying about this. He's doing this unethical thing, and so like, and Kim is sort of horrified by this at the start. Kim is like, I can't know about that, but like at the end, Kim becomes like a bigger villain than he is. Now that
Right,
we're at the end of the show, but Jimmy from the start. Sort of has contempt for normal people ethics, and like and it's just, and so but at the same, so Walt is like the same way. He's also like a likable person who in the end is selfish, and you like him. I guess you like him for his self-confidence and his competence. Why people like Walt. I think it's just something. I think it's just something like that. I think he's in his own reality, and that exerts like a powerful pull on people. But then on the flip side of that, you have these very unlikable characters that turn out to actually be good. The brother-in-law, Hank. What was Hank's last name?
Schrader.
Hank Schrader. Okay, that makes sense. And then in Saul, who do you think the unlikable good guys are? Because I have a view on this.
Unlikable good guys. I mean, that's tough. I mean, who are the good guys to begin with? I
Okay.
mean, maybe Howard, or I guess Howard might come the closest to
Yes, I
fitting
think
that
it's Howard. I think
description.
it's Howard, and I think it's Chuck. I will go back to those first seasons, and at the start, Jimmy is likable and Chuck is not. So you want to take Jimmy's side when they argue. But everything Chuck says about Jimmy's like not having that, the ethical standards and, the to be a lawyer. At one point he calls him, a monkey with a machine gun. He's right. He's absolutely right about all those things. And Jimmy just thinks that, his brother is irrationally out to get him. And like, maybe, Chuck does have, bitterness towards Jimmy because, there's these great scenes where like, the mom at the deathbed, like wants Jimmy, his wife, Chuck's wife is charmed by Jimmy. He doesn't like the fact that people like Jimmy more than they like him. But, that's the grand scheme of things. That's not, I don't think what's motivating. I think it's a lot of what's motivating him is like, he sees like Jimmy like should not be a lawyer and is like doing a lot of bad things. And then, Henry Hamlin, I mean, he's, a lot of, his stuff is like, he allows, he goes to bat for Jimmy at the beginning. I'd forgotten about this. When Jimmy gets work at Davis and Maine, right? He goes to bat for him, and like Jimmy's surprised, and Jimmy like refuses to believe it.
Yeah.
So it seems like now we're in season 6. It seems like Howard is shaping up to be like Jimmy's antagonist. Him and Lalo. He's got two antagonists left. And so, yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts there?
Well, Howard's a really interesting character to me. He's actually become one of my favorite characters because when you're introduced to him in the first season of the show, they kind of take care to set Howard up as the bad guy to Jimmy, the antagonist who's holding back his career. There's this sad flashback where they show you Jimmy in the mailroom the day he passed the bar, they're throwing a party. Then Howard comes in, they zoom out, and they just show you silently from outside the conversation where he tells Jimmy that he's not going to get a job at HHM. So, but then, as time goes on throughout the first few seasons, you find out there's a lot more complexity to Howard.
Yeah,
First of all, you find out that
I don't know if we explicitly found this out, but it was Chuck who probably didn't want him there. I don't remember if it was explicit or it's just like implied, but there was a few things where it's like Jimmy thinks it's Howard, but it's actually Chuck.
Yeah, you find out that it's been Chuck the whole time, forcing Howard to hold Jimmy back.
Howard just goes between the brothers and takes the hate from Jimmy, right?
And you find out that Howard actually really likes Jimmy.
He does at the beginning. Yes. It's like he does. I love this awkward thing where he goes, "I call you Charlie Hustle." Like he's got this lame nickname for him, and he's just like.
And he reveals that. He reveals that when he's in court testifying against Jimmy.
And
then I think Howard even likes Jimmy as recently as last season. I mean, he bends over backward.
What were you talking about? That the report. What did got revealed by Howard about Jimmy?
In the last season,
we talked about exactly. Yeah, what did Howard reveal about Jimmy in court?
Oh, in court, I'm just thinking of the part where he was testifying against Jimmy. Kim was cross-examining him, and basically one of the things she's trying to establish is that Howard actually likes Jimmy, and that's when he says, "Oh yeah, I like Jimmy. I call him Charlie Hustle."
Yeah. Okay. So he says Charlie Hustle again. Okay. Yeah. I didn't rewatch that again. That's funny. Yeah. So there's a few the Charlie Hustle thing is just, I love that. That's just such a little touch and it's funny. But yeah.
And then remember, Howard is even bending over backwards trying to hire Jimmy in the last season, season 5.
Yes. This is, I mean, it's a credit to the show that I did not see this. I'm so blinded, and I think the audience is blinded by. Howard, I mean, what is it about him that makes him sort of unlikable? He's reserved. I think people take reserve often for, I don't know, snobbery or like disinterest in other people. I think that's a common mistake people make. And I think that's what's going on with Howard.
That he's reserved. He's kind of uptight, buttoned up, always professional.
Yes, and that's not necessarily. Yeah, that's not necessarily. Right? Yeah, but that's not necessarily that doesn't say how much you care about people or whether you're a moral person, right? But I think people take that as, if not immorality, there's something, I don't know, something off, something unlikable about that, right?
I think Howard could potentially come across as insincere. the way he's always got one level, and that one setting he's on is that
Yeah.
he's happy to be there, and he likes you. He comes across a little bit as like a salesman.
Yeah, but it's sometimes for noble cause, like when when he's defending, Chuck, or if not noble, at least like selfless, right? He's taking the hate from Jimmy to protect Chuck, right? Um, and so yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, what and so Jimmy, I mean, Jimmy is also a salesman, but it's sort of in the sense that it's obviously, a big salesman, but it's in the sense of like I am like you're in on the joke. It's so I think about like Jimmy as like Trump. Like, okay, so politicians like all like lie to you, right?
Mm.
And like sometimes there's like a guy who comes around and is like, this is all, I'm in on the joke with you. Like I'm gonna say like women, I respect women more than anyone in history, right? Trump says like stuff like this. And this is just so over the top, it's like hilarious. It's like you're in on the joke with
Mm.
him. Um there was yeah, there was this great speech that Trump gave during the 2016 primaries at Liberty University. And it was like so silly, like the way he was talking about the Bible. He's like, "Oh, I love Corinthians 2 or 2 Corinthians," but it's just like you look at that speech and it's over the like the Bible. He's talking about it like he's like a vaudeville act, like saying like, "Oh, this book is like the greatest thing ever," and nobody is fooled by this. I mean, but it's sort of it's funny, and it brings you into the joke, and he's respecting them enough to pander. He's
Yeah.
not insulting their religion explicitly.
Well, it was this the speech where an interviewer asked him like what his favorite Bible passage was, and he was like, all of them. I
Oh,
just
that was
love them all.
yeah,
Great book, best book.
yeah. He did this a lot. So that was at the beginning of the primaries. I think this was this was later on. This was later on. But that's Jimmy. I mean, that's Jimmy. That's likable. That's likable. No, not everyone likes him. Obviously, Trump, obviously, but some people are horrified about that. The people who like him, they like that. And then Howard is like I don't know, Josh Hawley or somebody who I think is like a very unlikable, like normal Paul. Like he goes through the motions and like you're not in on the joke. It's like I'm here and you're there, and I'm going to perform for you the way you want me to be. Like, so Howard's like, I'm going to be like professional, well established member of community, a good lawyer, and like the politicians do this too, and that rubs people the wrong way. Maybe they vote for you because like whatever, you're the better alternative, but they don't become passionate about it. They see you as sort of a politician. um and so, yeah, I mean, these are interesting types with like, with analogs in the real world and other
Mm.
areas of life.
Yeah, I think the way I'd sum up what's appealing about Howard's arc to me is that he seems unlikable and he seems artificial, kind of. But as time goes on, you realize that he's actually pretty sincere most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's this like ethnic thing where it's like, there's like, it's like there's like a WASP thing where like those of us who are not WASPs, Asians are different category, but like those of us who are like Southern Europeans or Near Easterners, we're more emotional and we're more direct, and the norm for Northern Europeans and WASPs, and like Jimmy and Chuck, they're Irish, and so Irish are I don't know if this is cultural or genetic or what, but the Irish tend not to fall into that code. They tend to have different personality profile than Scandinavians or like high class British people, and so it's like like Jimmy's like friend, his old friend from Cicero is Marco, right? So he's got this this good Mexican friend. I don't know if he has any other. Does he have any other really? Does he have any other real friends in his life? No, not really.
I
But
don't remember Marco. Is he in the early
no,
season?
Marco's the big fat guy.
Huh. Don't remember.
No, of course you remember. Like when they have those flashbacks to slipping Jimmy.
Oh, okay. In the flashbacks. Okay.
Yeah, and the guy who's falling, the guy who dies, right? Remember Marco, the guy where they do the scam where he's on the ground with the watch.
Ah, okay. It's coming back to me vaguely.
Okay.
This
Oh,
was.
it's funny you don't remember that because you remember things that seem to be. So yeah. So anyways, yeah. Marco was this like fat, like Hispanic guy who was Jimmy's old friend, right? So he's slipping Jimmy. Like when you have those flashbacks to Cicero, that's the guy who's always with him, who's always the fat guy, the fat bald guy who's always running the scams with Jimmy. Um, But yeah, there's the ethnic thing. I think is interesting, and it's not exactly there, but it's like it reflects, I think, things you see in the real world.
So, I mean, I'm not completely following you here on the ethnicity stuff. So you're saying that Howard is a bit off-putting because he comes off as like a stuck-up wasp?
Well, because he is a stuck-up wasp, basically.
Uh-huh.
But he's not necessarily stuck up. It comes across that way. But there's a sort of there's a cultural or an ethnic thing where it's like there are some groups that are more reserved.
Hmm.
And like Howard is an Italian, doesn't necessarily. I don't think it works, right? I don't think. Maybe he is an Italian, but I don't know what what's ethnic background of the show is. He could be any kind of European for all I know. But I don't know. I don't think this is a huge part of the show. It's just the individual types I think do correspond to some ethnic categories. It's also so, but Jimmy plays into this when he becomes Jewish, right? And then he tells he tells them they want a smart. He tells Walter the first time they meet, the criminals want a smart lawyer, basically,
Uh,
and that's how he convinces them he's
the whole
smart.
Goodman thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he's appealed to that maybe for the first time in one of the recent episodes at the country club when they're
oh
trying to
yeah,
throw him
yeah,
out. He's like, oh, it's because it's the moment I said my name, Goodman. That's when you started treating me differently.
yeah. So yeah. So I mean, any other what are your what are your sort of broad thoughts about sort of what the producer what they're trying to tell us about just humanity or interpersonal reactions or life or anything broad like that?
Yeah, it's a good question because I mean, so we know that kind of the formula they're following for both shows is showing you how a guy that's not that bad becomes pretty bad. Uh, so that's kind of what we know.
See, I
And
would disagree on Jimmy. I think he goes from like the if you're gonna rank humans, he goes from like the bottom 5% to like the bottom 1%. Like I think he gets worse, but I don't think he's ever a good person. But yeah, go ahead.
we can agree to disagree on that.
Uh,
And maybe it's because I kind of like him.
yeah,
And you're saying that how likable somebody is
that's
basically
fair.
has no correlation or an anti-correlation with how good they are, how decent they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's Jimmy. That's Jimmy's charm. That's what helps him get out of tough situations. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, so I guess I'm not completely sure what point the show is trying to make at its core. I think part of it is it's posing this question to us, and the question it's posing to us is kind of, is Chuck right that Jimmy was always destined to become a chimp with a machine gun as a lawyer? Is Chuck right that this bad stuff at Jimmy's core was always going to surface no matter what? Or did moments like Chuck telling him that help make him that way? You know, was it destiny, or was it kind of the perception of Jimmy as being, a con artist that helped make him one? And I'm not
yeah,
sure that the show is taking a definitive stance on that, but I think it wants us to be wondering about that.
yeah. It's yeah. What about does that tell us something broader beyond one man's journey? About sort of human beings. I think what's the likable thing is interesting, and I think it also like from the outside, if you're just reading like a broad outline of like what's happening in the show, you're like, okay, you could put these people into box. Like this is a criminal A, and this is criminal B, and this is criminal C, and society basically treats them all like criminals. And I don't think this show is saying that you shouldn't do that. Yeah, I don't think it has a liberal message on crime by any means. I mean, I think it's actually its attitudes towards crime and punishment, the law. We can maybe get to that, but I think it's conservative or reactionary. But at the same time, without falling into these sort of liberal ideas or liberal tropes about whatever, everyone is basically the same. It does have sort of moralistic sense, but it really shows how you can go down a path like and every step of the path can look like not a big deal,
Hmm.
or justified. You because you are inside these people's minds. You get Jimmy's self-justification for every step of the way, and you get Walter White's self-justification every step of the way, and you're like them. You almost don't notice that they're becoming worse and worse. And you don't have that for say Howard or Hank or something. You would have a different perspective if you could see like what these guys struggle with more. Or maybe even if they were just maybe if you did see it, you wouldn't care because they're so unlikable. Like you would just not sympathize with them. Anyway, but yeah, I think it's there's a episode where it's Mike. Mike is like the wise man of like he's like supposed to be somewhat like fount of wisdom, deep wisdom, I think. And he tells Jimmy at some point, we all make our choices, and I think this is like the most real that the show ever gets. Like this line where he goes, we all make our choices, and like every step you go closes off other steps, or like it gets you down a different road, or something like that. Do you remember the
Yeah.
scene?
Yeah. It's a recent one. He called it like the episode's called like Bad Choice Road or something like that. That's
Okay,
the
yeah. So it
scene.
was the name of the episode. Okay, it was yeah. I think that was the closest thing to the producer like talking to us, like telling us, like,
Right.
okay,
Breaking
this
the
is what we're
fourth
doing.
wall a bit.
Yeah,
Just helping us understand the series.
yeah, because it usually doesn't do that. I mean, you're figuring it out for yourself, what's really cool about it. But yeah, I mean, if anyone does sort of like tell you how it is, it's Mike.
Yeah. So like, what do you think? And so, yeah, certainly it's showing us how you can be faced with all these small choices and make what seem to be reasonable decisions and be led, to break bad, basically. Do you think? I mean, what do you think the show is implying about our degree of control over it? Is it kind of implying that it was destiny for these bad choices to happen, or is there some kind of moralistic lesson like we can avoid it? We need to stop. We need to draw the line somewhere and stop
Yeah,
going down the bad road.
yeah. I mean, is it destiny? I think there is a. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there is a deterministic streak. You do get characters who are. Oh, by the way, another person who's I think likable or at least intriguing, but also a bad person is Gus Fring. I mean, so I think that's I
Hmm.
think he also falls a bit into that category. You're enamored by him, but he is a evil person. Now, somebody like so like to answer your question, I think there are prototypes of just bad people. So like Hector, I think is the closest thing in the shows to like and just an evil guy who has no redeeming qualities, just a sadist and a murderer, and just doesn't have any moral compunction about anything. Those twins, those two tall bald
Yep.
twins who go around just like slaughter. They have no depth. They're just like
Right.
evil.
There's nothing to them.
I think there's one scene in Breaking Bad where like Hector treats them like he pretends to drown them, or he starts to drown one of them. And then, like, do you remember this? He takes one of them, and they're like back when they're
Oh,
little kids. He takes one of them and he starts drowning them. And
yeah.
like, okay, maybe Hector had something, maybe a little bit, but that's like the only hint of like, there anyway, there's any way you could sympathize with them. And then like Lalo is interesting because it's the first time everyone that you have to have some good quality I think to be intriguing because Lalo the first time he did something good I think was the last one of the last episodes where he killed those guys who were going to take
Hmm.
him over the border but then he gives the money back
Right.
the illegal immigrants,
Yeah, I was
right?
just thinking about that. Well, I mean, they're not illegal immigrants yet.
Okay, yes, the potential migrants, yes, exactly, the aspiring illegal
Besides, you're
immigrants.
supposed to call them undocumented.
No, we don't do that on this show. We have a code. We have a speech code that goes opposite of normal speech codes, where we always look for the most inflammatory way to describe things. So, yeah. So that's I think is the first thing he does. That's actually okay. So and when that lady gets like he's obviously in pain when that lady gets killed. When they go slaughter everyone down in Mexico, and then that old woman who cooks for them, whoever she is, he's like, he's enraged by this. He's morally outraged by this. I don't know if that's like a big deal because it's like whatever. He's morally outraged. Somebody got killed. He killed an innocent guy who wasn't in the game. That was a big thing. Nacho and Mike. So he killed the guy who was in quote unquote in the game. I guess this is like how you separate him from like other people who might do bad things.
Yeah.
Uh,
And those guys he killed, I guess you'd call them coyotes. Uh, the guys who were going to smuggle the people across the border. You
yeah,
know, think of like what he killed them over. He killed them over what was maybe a few $100.
yeah,
And we really got no reason to think that the money actually mattered much to him.
yeah,
Like it's more like He just
Well,
that was just his excuse to kill them.
maybe he thinks coyotes need to be held to a standard of ethics, and
Maybe that's it.
these are bad coyotes who do not offer
Maybe he was
refunds.
trying to enforce a U.S. Mexican immigration policy.
No, because yes, those coyotes are bad. I mean, they were rude. They were, whatever. They're providing a service. I guess they have a right in their business to have no refund policy. But that kind of that kind of yeah, it's a pride thing. It's like I'm this big criminal who does all these things. So yeah, so I can't be ripped off by these these nobodies. Uh, so yeah. So yeah, I do think there is a deterministic streak here. And the interesting characters are the ones who have them pulling a little in each direction. So a lot of the people either fall into one category or the other, right? They're either really evil, like Hector and a lot of the cartel people, or they're, I don't know if there's like heroes and everything, but like people who are just like the rule followers, right? I think there's like Skylar, like Walter White's wife, is just a rule follower. Like I don't know if she'll like sacrifice her, but it's just like something is illegal, we don't do it. And maybe this is like admirable. Like this is like how people should be. Maybe in Vince Gilligan's worldview, it's like we're not. This is a very sort of the people are not, you can think of like it's like a conservative outlook where it's like people are not, smart enough to go around figure out morality for themselves. So we have these societal norms, and like the good person is just basically he who follows them. And so you have, I think that, you have an actual heroic character who from the start is heroic and a good person.
So who is that?
No, I'm wondering. Maybe they're minor character. Maybe Nacho's dad, who's always like he doesn't care about the consequences. He just says go to the police, no matter what.
Right.
Doesn't believe in his son doing any kind of crime. Yeah. Who else is sort of?
By the way, I think Chuck is the best example of somebody who's a rule follower. I don't know if he's necessarily good. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have seen anything to make me call Chuck a good person, but he's definitely a rule follower.
He's a rule follower. A lot of lawyers, I mean, a lot of successful lawyers, I think, tend to be these kind of people. By the way, do you think having been to law school makes the show more enjoyable? I think it does for me. I hear them talking about like discovery, and I hear them talking about statutes and all this other stuff and contempt of court, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is.
A little bit. Well, to be honest with you, to some degree, I'm learning stuff about the law that I didn't learn in law school. Really, I just learned a bunch of constitutional law in law school, some other basic stuff. But it wasn't, my education wasn't big on civil procedure.
Yeah, the civil procedure. I did well in civil procedures. I took two civil. I don't know if I think we had two civil procedure classes required. So I remembered enough of that to get to be very interested in that stuff. But we'll have to talk about sort of. I think it's telling us something about the legal profession too. I think we should talk about that. But the question of like sort of So anyways, so you have these evil types. You have these either good or rule follower types, but you have like Hank is not exactly a rule follower, he's still good. He doesn't take bribes. He's trying to put the bad guys away. He's trying to protect innocent people. He's a jerk who like forces Walt Jr. to like drink a fifth of vodka or something. But like that's like the way he lives his life and the way he does. Or no, he stops him. Walt wants him to drink that fifth of vodka. That's right. And then Hank stops him from going too far. And so you have these, and then the interesting characters, the main characters, are the ones who have a bit of complexity and are neither the rule followers nor the monsters, right?
I think that kind of the closest you get to somebody who chooses their own destiny in this show and chooses not to break bad, it's actually Nacho. I think Nacho is the shining example of somebody who doesn't follow the arc that most of the other characters in both of these shows follow. I mean, take even Kim, take Walt, take Mike, for instance, Jimmy. All of those are stories about them slowly breaking bad and being led into it. But Nacho is the closest we get to an example of somebody who kind of started out very far down on the path of breaking bad and kind of went the other direction and
Yeah.
resisted the forces that were leading him to basically do bad stuff.
Well, I mean, was he like did it was but was it all self-interest? So like he kills, he again, spoiler, it was a shocking scene to me, by the way, when he killed himself. But it wasn't for some greater it was to protect his dad, right? Only it was so this is like Walt doing things for his family, right? um does he at any point sacrifice himself for like strangers or like for the greater good, or it's like he finds himself in a terrible situation. Like Gus doesn't like him, so he takes away the pills of Hector, and then like I think the thing is Gus has that over him somehow. I forget how exactly this happens, but Gus basically won't let him get out of the game. But like it's like it seems like it could be self-interested the whole time, right? He's there's nothing. It's just like he's in a bad situation, and he's not like a good person. He just wants to go live a quiet life because he's stuck here, and it's just like really really bad for him.
Well, it's always kind of a tough moral question whether to call it altruism or self-interest when somebody sacrifices themselves for their family and friends. I mean, it's kind of a mixture of both.
Yeah.
But to a certain degree, Nacho is, sacrificing his life just to save his dad.
Yeah.
And there is something selfless about that,
Yeah.
even though, it's his dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like, yeah, to me that there has to be a higher standard to it. Like to sacrifice for your family is like the natural thing, right? To do it for a stranger.
Here's another example.
Uh-huh.
Towards the end of his life, we see Nacho showing concern about not getting Lalo's workers killed. Basically, the cook and the guards. Some of those people are just pretty innocent, like the old lady who's doing the cooking. There are at least a couple of times where it shows us Nacho going out of his way to try and make them not get killed by this.
Yeah. Great point.
He asks Mike about it after it all goes down.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So he gets that call and he says, "Oh, there's innocent people here," and they just hang up on him. They don't care, right? He doesn't have to do that. Yeah, I think you're completely right there. What about Gus Fring? What was that? I mean, what was that? So we can talk about the last episode. What was like? Who are these people who live with him? Like, does he have a family? Like, he has dinner with Walt that one time, and he's like, "Oh, I think he mentions the kids. He mentions the wife and kids." Some people speculate he's gay. That was his partner.
Oh, he's definitely gay.
Oh, he's definitely gay.
I mean, remember, like this all starts. There's this flashback where he's with his boyfriend, meeting with Don Eladio and Hector, and Hector kills his boyfriend.
I thought he was just his homie. Why is he? Well, how do we know he's his boyfriend?
Oh, they were just very good friends. No, man. I don't know. Look it up. They were gay.
Why? What was that? What was because they call him? At some point, Hector or somebody says like, "Oh, him and his boyfriend," which could mean like his friend that we killed. Like it doesn't necessarily.
I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched this. I mean, I don't remember. Did they show Gus and the other guy, the other Pollo Hermano? Did they show them kissing or anything? I don't remember. I thought that it was clearly established that they were in a relationship.
Yeah, I would have remembered them kissing. No, there was not. There was not anything like that. But then he does mention to. I still remember this scene. I watched this like the Breaking Bad like 10 years ago. When he has it's at his house. He has Walt over for like dinner or something.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, the wife and kid." Does he say kids or the wife and kids? He either says the wife and kids or the kids are away. And then Walt sort of looks up and like raises his eyebrow, and and then that's sort of the end of it. And I don't know, like this is this like the cover because
I didn't remember that part. But so you're asking who this couple are in the house across the street from the house he walks over to under the tunnel.
Oh, he goes under the tunnel and then he goes, and there's like, yeah, who are they? Are they a couple? Oh, they're the black.
I feel like they're just some couple that he hired to live in that house, basically to occupy it, to give himself cover. So this house is basically his safe house. His safe house is right across the street from his regular house, and it's got to be occupied. And so that's basically this couple's job. And they're so used to it that they just live their lives, and then they go on living their lives as normal. Even when they walk into their kitchen at the beginning of the episode, and there's guys with the guns hanging out there. They
Yeah, I
just
thought
keep
those were
talking
their.
about like the
I thought
homeowners
those were their
association.
kids. I thought one of them was their kids, and I said maybe not. I don't know
Really?
because
I didn't get that
because
impression.
they all look the right race to be. They're a white man and a black woman, and they were all black. Maybe not even half. I don't know. They look the right race to be the kids and young enough. I don't know.
I don't know.
Um,
I just thought they were hired guns. I just thought they were
or maybe
mercenaries.
they could be both. They could be kids and hired guns. I suppose. Um, Yeah. And so this character, this is an evil character, right? He shows compassion and caring towards Jesse, and that's like what we're supposed to like in Breaking Bad. That's what we're supposed to like about it at Breaking Bad.
You
And
mean that
he's got
Walt
the
shows that compassion to Jesse?
no.
Or
Gus does
Gus?
too.
What when does
Yeah, yeah.
Gus do that?
Oh, the whole thing. Basically, like Walt at some point. So in the later, like a major storyline is Gus, and maybe he's doing this for selfish reasons, but he's trying to separate Jesse. He's trying to bring Jesse in and like isolate Walt. And
Mhm.
Walt does the thing where he poisons the kid in order to frame Gus for it to like end this, right? But Gus is always taking care of Jesse. Jesse at one point asks him, like, why are you doing this or something? And he's like, Gus is like, I like to think I see things in people. So like
Mhm.
it was a clear, storyline that Gus was like taking care of Jesse, and maybe partly just to split up with Walt, but also
Well, yeah,
like it's genuine.
it was. I mean, a lot of it was just that he wanted a more reliable replacement for Walt, and he saw the potential in Jesse to be that. Uh,
Yeah,
and I mean, this was really just he saw potential in Jesse to be a good worker in the drug trade, basically.
yeah. I guess you're probably right. I guess there's probably nothing redeeming about Gus. He's close to an evil character, then,
Like
right?
Gus, and maybe Lalo, but mostly Gus. He's about as close as you come to straightforward, cold-hearted bastard.
Yeah. Except Hector. Hector, like, and the universe tortures him for it, right? He becomes like this vegetable who like watches his family die.
Yeah.
There's like sort of a cosmic justice. Like the worst character ends up in like the sort of the worst fate.
Hmm.
But then Hector sort of redeems himself by killing Gus, who's like also evil, but like a more powerful character, particularly at that point. Um, and then so there's definitely moral types. There's a moralism to the show. There is a so Vince Gilligan. I haven't read a lot about him, but I know in some interview he said he's quote, I think he's quote something like more conservative than most people in Hollywood. He doesn't want to go much further than that. But yeah, there's no sense that there's no moralizing here. So to have a show in 2022 that involves like a huge minority cast and not to have any lectures about racism or like society, white society making them this way, like there's not a hint of that. And that's quite remarkable in this day and age. Even Kim, to have a professional woman who doesn't experience quote unquote like explicit sexism at any point. Like there's never a point where Henry Howard and Chuck are like, oh, you're a woman, you can't handle, haha. Like any producer, like any normal Hollywood producer would like put that stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's none of that.
If
And
anything, you see
women,
Kim's like male colleagues always treating her with a high degree of respect. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that characterizes Kim's relationships with say Rich, or with Ken. Like
yeah.
there's always a moment where she just comes into flat out conflict with her male boss, and basically they back down and they respect her.
She is also, she manipulates them. The last episode, what's that guy's name? That guy from Davis and Maine.
Oh, Cliff Maine.
Yeah, so she's like using him to like to just to come and like he's excited about public service, and she's just
Right,
like
right.
using him to like frame Howard for this thing. And Chuck too. So she knows that Jimmy switched the Mesa Verde addresses, and but she goes out of her way to like tell Chuck that he's like losing his marbles and like, Jimmy's actually innocent, right? So from the start, she's covering for Jimmy for, because she likes him and for self-interested, reasons,
Mhm.
this whole time. Um, so yes, and actually, I was tweeting the other day that yeah, the Breaking Bad, like there's only two female characters and they're both stay at home wives. Um, Skylar and then Hank's wife, and then somebody reminded me there's a third Lydia who's just like
Yeah.
a neurotic lunatic, and so those are the only female characters like in the show, and then you have Saul, which is the only real female character, I guess, like the nurse, like, the Mike's, whatever, daughter-in-law,
Right.
uh,
It's
and then
mostly
like,
Kim.
yeah, it's mostly just Kim, and she is, she's, of average morality, I guess, but goes towards bad, and goes bad in a very womanly way because she's influenced by, she's influenced by a charming man, basically, to go
Hmm.
down, this path. So
Hmm.
the gender and the gender politics of this, I think, is to the extent it has any, is quite conservative for the current year.
Can you elaborate on that part for me? You think that Kim goes bad in a particularly womanly way. I'm not quite following you there.
So basically, the idea is that women are sometimes influenced by charismatic men, right?
Hmm.
So you agree with that it's she's basically following Jimmy. She later surpasses him in her sneakiness and her underhandedness. Like he doesn't want to do the Howard thing, and she wants to do it. Um, but she's doing it for her own social climbing reasons. But she's also doing it because she's being led by Jimmy. Through a lot of the parts of the show, like Charlie and Howard are saying things like, he's a bad influence or he's like leading you in this wrong direction or like things like that. They never say she's going to go bad. They never say that, but they say like,
Hmm.
getting involved with Jimmy, like they're giving her warnings about this. And
Hmm.
she doesn't listen, but that actually is what ends up happening. She's enamored with him, and she ends up following his lead and becoming more and more like him.
You know, I think I think Kim is one of the most complex characters on the show, and I think that she's always had like hidden depths that the show is just starting to really reveal to us now.
Mm.
And so I think that we still haven't quite seen what's going on with Kim. It's just starting to show us to that now because it introduces Kim, and at the beginning we're supposed for whole seasons in a row we're supposed to think that Kim is just this straight laced good person, rule follower, wants to protect the weak and all that. But I think that we are kind of led to believe that Jimmy is corrupting her throughout the course of the middle seasons. But I
Mm.
think as it gets towards the end of the show,
Mm.
season 5 and now especially season 6, I think that part of what the show is trying to tell us is that it was fooling us. That
Mm.
there was always this bad stuff, this sleazy stuff, this god complex that Kim had, and it's not that really that Jimmy corrupted, you know, corrupted her. It's more like he brought out her bad side,
Hmm.
and now her bad side is surpassing his, and she's the one corrupting him.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to like the first seasons. Are there hints of this in Kim's character? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, at some point, like because you have to go back and watch the first few things that Jimmy does. You remember the pie videos that he made with that weird guy?
Yeah,
That like so like that's the first thing he does something like illegal or like violates ethic codes. And Kim is like, I can't hear about this. This
right.
is horrible. Um, but I guess it doesn't take much to corrupt her because when the Mesa Verde thing comes in, and it's to her advantage, she goes full all in and covering for Jimmy, um, and taking advantage of it and being the beneficiary, of his actions. Um, so
And
is
she
she
always has this
complex?
belief,
Yeah.
from the beginning
Huh?
when he involves her in his scams. Like the first one was like trying to get some drinks out of a guy at the bar or something. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Kim
yeah. The
was never
expensive
very
tequila.
hard to convince. Like she always just kind of went for it eagerly and had this kind
But
of guilty pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess there's two like prototypes of like how a woman like can interact with a man and like do bad things. There's the so there's but I think both interpretations are sort of consistent with, let's say, a more conservative understanding of gender politics, where it's not like, it's like men and women have their own, like, they each have their sort of own skills, and they can each manipulate a situation, gain power and control in their own way, right? And so that's like one of what that's what you're saying. It's like, she's like Lady Macbeth, right? But it's more subtle than Lady Macbeth is, right? Um, and then you have sort of, a woman being a woman being better, at these social games than men are, and also better, and where women often really stand out is sort of uh, hiding the role. Like Jimmy is like obviously like a scam artist,
Hmm.
and Kim is a person who who you would never suspect that, but she has that in her and is very good at it. Once she gets a taste that she can do this, she gets very good at it. So look, what I was saying was more like a simplified, like maybe like Victorian era, like very like simple understanding of, and maybe this is what Howard and Charlie, they have this kind of Chuck, they have this kind of paternalism towards her, like, oh, he's corrupting you. At one point, actually Chuck does say that explicitly when he's confronting Jimmy about Mesa Verde. He says, you're ruining this young woman or something like that, and then Jimmy goes, what is this, the 1840s, or something like that. Um, and so yeah, so Chuck and Howard are actually, your interpretation, I think is onto something, and I think Chuck and Howard are, implicitly had my model, which is like, now that you mention it, I think is could be wrong. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
think
right.
that basically they're kind of, you latched onto this trope that they meant to convey to us, but it was kind of supposed to
Mm,
be a red herring. They were kind of playing
yeah,
with us by making us
yeah,
think that it was the story of Jimmy corrupting Kim, corrupting a
yeah,
good woman.
yeah. And the other one of a scheming woman is also a sort of trope too. But these things are tropes because they're often, have some basis in reality. But you're not sure exactly, which one it actually applies in this case.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's interesting stuff. The gender stuff is really fascinating. I mean, uh the the race stuff. I mean, there's not a lot of race stuff, and thank God for that. But it is a show with like a huge minority, cast, and with that, like, it's funny. When you go onto like Netflix or Hulu now, it's like has like these sections for different races. It's like comedy, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and then
Hmm.
there's like Hispanic, and I never see Breaking Bad or like Better Call Saul there, right? In like the Latino section, which is like, you think it would fit. There's obviously a huge Mexican, influence on the show. Um,
Yeah, well,
eh,
all the, I guess most of the protagonists are white guys, I guess.
well, not Nacho, right? Nacho is probably the second or third most important character in Better Call Saul. It goes Kim and Jimmy, and then I think Lalo is probably, Mike. Okay, Mike, and then so yeah, I mean, it's Nacho. Nacho's maybe in fourth place. Um,
Not anymore.
yeah, not anymore. But I mean, he's a major character.
Yeah,
Those
he
are the
was a
big
great
four,
character.
right? But even, even those I
You're
would put
right.
ahead.
We need to write them and write Netflix and tell them to include it into the Latino representation
Well, it's
category.
funny. Well, this is not. Well, maybe it's just too big for that. Maybe the ethnic categories are for like things nobody else would watch for any other reason, right? And so it's like I Love Lucy is not in the it's not in the Hispanic section. So maybe it's that. But I also think, like, it's not, there's no hint that the Mexicans are victims, and the white guys are manipulating them, or getting, the people are individuals, and they're good or bad. If anything, the Mexicans are criminals, right? And the white people are sometimes scam artists like Jimmy, but generally less not violent if they are criminals. Um,
I do think the show. I could be wrong about this, but I think I agree with you that the show isn't particularly trying to tell us anything at all about race.
well, I don't think I don't. Yeah, well, you you don't do you see, I don't think it's like, I sound like a leftist here, but I don't think you can have a show that is about things going on at the U.S.-Mexico border is about ethnic crime networks and not have at least an implicit story about race. Maybe it's not the leftist story about race, which is what we think about when we think about like stories about race. But the idea that it's not like the characters are right. They're speaking Spanish sometimes they're speaking English. These people are assimilating into a different country. They're even if you say like that's seamless for them, and it's not that tells you something about race and ethnic politics or something, right? I don't think there's a way not to have some kind of ethnic or racial message here. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe not
I
about
mean,
more. It doesn't have a story like white people are good or Mexicans are better. It's not like that simplified, but it is telling us something about society and the way these groups interact with each other.
I guess the next question for me would be, what do you think it's telling us?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm
Keep
trying
it
to.
liberal. Race is always part of the story. Tell us
Yeah,
what role it plays in the story.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if maybe it's implicitly telling us that it's. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's implicitly telling us we do think about it, you know, uh, too much because it is like okay. So here's one thing. So Gus, I think this is like a conservative message. Like you're lucky to live in America. Like you cross the border, and like it's a war zone. It's basically a war zone. And Gus at one point when the cartel comes to try to intimidate him at his restaurant, he gives this speech to his fast food employees, and he's like they're like, he's trying to tell them who they were, and he tells them some story about like how when he was in, was it Argentina or Chile, wherever he came, Chile, I think, or Mexico, I don't
Maybe
know, but it's
Colombia.
just
I think it was Colombia.
oh no, he's originally from, I think from Chile, yeah, because he mentioned the Pinochet government,
Oh, okay.
I think, but anyways, but he was in Mexico at some point. He stopped in Mexico, and he's telling his employees that like this is America, so I don't have to pay the bribe, and they're all like, oh yay, like it's like he's inspiring them. So the message is like so like American law enforcement is very uncorrupt in the show, and I think it's pretty close. I don't think it's unrealistic, especially at the federal level, that the levels of corruption in American law enforcement are low. Mexico obviously is not like that. Like the federales are like they're bought off by Gus
By the
or
Salmontes, by Eladio.
yeah, they're always sort of one of the criminal gangs, right? So this is I don't know if this is about race per se, but it's about nationhood and like geopolitics, and it's telling us something about like how things work in different countries.
I guess my impression is that when it comes to you know who's corrupt, I think that they're just trying to portray it realistically. They're just trying to, the cartel, the DEA, they're
Yeah, but
trying to give all those
that's
people, they're
politically
trying to make
radical.
those people behave as they can to kind of create a realistic set of background conditions to run their experiment in, their
Yes.
experiment about how people would break bad under those conditions.
Yeah. Okay, yes, you think that. You think that that's realistic. A liberal is going to look at that and say they made the Mexicans government too bad and they made the Americans too good and they didn't show the systemic racism, which is the truth. The truth, if you were interested in the truth, that would be the background for the character development. You see what I'm saying? So it's like that seems like truth to you, and so it seems non-political. But to somebody else, maybe it is just truth. But
I
like
mean,
being on the side of
look,
truth, like is
look,
is
there's only so many minutes you have in a TV show. There's always going to be parts of the world that you don't show. I mean, look,
you
for
have
all I know, there's plenty of systemic racism or whatever in the Breaking Bad universe. It just doesn't tend to surface often in the drug trade.
mm, to have shows with crime and without systemic racism is today rare, and it is a choice not to portray. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's 6 seasons. There's 10 episodes per season. We're talking 2 series. I don't know. Breaking Bad was five seasons. I don't know. You have a lot of time. If you thought racism was an important force in society, there's a lot of time to somewhere at some point.
I mean, sure. I don't think that they're. I think a lot of people, given this much screen time to shows, a lot of people these days probably would have gone out of their way in some kind of awkward, shoehorned way, maybe, to
Yes.
show you some kind of
Right,
moralistic
and that's
lesson.
interesting that it's different from what everyone else is doing, and that there is a politics and a worldview that reflects.
It could be. I mean, it is kind of interesting that the times when they come closest to that are when they're kind of satirizing it, and it's when Saul is,
Yes.
I'm Jewish. Are you discriminating against me? That's kind of the closest they come to explicitly talking about any of this racism stuff. And those times when they do it, it's just used as like a sleazy trick that Saul is playing.
Yeah, yeah, and the elder stuff too. It'll be like, oh, this is elder, like it's like, yeah, yeah, they do a little some stuff like this. Yeah, you're right. It would be very easy for, um, yeah, it would be very easy for like to have a scene where like Nacho is racially profiled. Like you could imagine this, and then like you're supposed to wonder, wait a minute, is this why he resorted to crime?
Right, right. I mean,
If
a lot
anything,
of
the
shows
message
these
is,
days would have gone there. They would have just done the show exactly the way it is 95% of the time, and they would have thrown in the
yeah.
scene where Nacho is
Yeah.
racially profiled.
But if anything, it's telling you like, look, you see a young Mexican man who has gold chains and like, a shirt, a collared shirt with like the collar open and like, a haircut like Nacho. Like, you're right to be wary of him. If anything, it's like, what the stereotypes, are true. There's always in these shows, there's always like a guy who like dresses and talks exactly like the criminals, but he's profiled and that's supposed to be like a bad thing because he's like not actually a criminal. You know what I'm saying? Like there'll be a young black guy who wears like a hoodie, but he won't be a criminal. And then like somebody's like mean to him, and then it's like, oh well, I might as well be a criminal, or like I experience racism. And so there's nothing like that. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
I find
I
this
think
interesting.
I
You
think
see,
that the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul universe takes a kind of race neutral uh, lens much of the
that's a
time.
political that is
It's
totally,
like, yeah, we're going to show you drug addicts of all races.
yeah. Go to go to your philosophy department in Michigan and say, I'm not political. I have a race neutral. You see if they agree that that's a a non-political
Yeah, yeah.
stance.
I know the argument you're trying to make, and if the point you're trying to drive at is that there's kind of a more conservative leaning worldview implied
Yes,
by all of that,
yes,
I suppose I would agree. Just in this, but it's not hard. It's more like 10 years ago this wouldn't have been viewed as a political statement. Okay, I
yes,
think that I think they've just stayed in kind of the mindset that they would have had 10 years ago. I mean, how long ago did Breaking Bad start? More than 10 years ago, and
yeah.
I think
No,
they're
you're right,
just sticking in the mindset that
yeah,
they used from the beginning.
right. But they did stick to it. I mean, and that is notable. Um, yeah, I think you're right. It does reflect a conservative view on these things, on I think morality, and I think on race, I think on sex. I think this is a sort of a common thread, and so
I guess what I want to add to that is that I don't think that it's some kind of intentional choice. It's more like a choice to stick with the mode they started in Breaking Bad at the beginning. They
is it
didn't, as the world changed, as the nation changed and kind of moved left towards identity politics over the last
yeah,
decade, over the last 5 years. I think that basically what you're identifying is simply that Vince Gilligan and the crew
right.
didn't choose to move with them.
Well,
They chose to stay in the mode they started
which
in.
is rare and notable. Have you seen the Sopranos film?
The film, the new one, like the Many
Yeah.
Saints of Newark, I didn't see that. No, I
Okay.
saw
Well,
most of the Sopranos, but not the recent one.
okay. Okay, so yeah, I did a show on it with Rob, and I think Dave Chase is the guy's name, right? He definitely, well, there's controversy, there's some uncertainty about how much he was actually involved in the movie, but it's preachy, it's woke, it's PC, it's absolutely terrible, and it did change from the time that The Sopranos was on TV until the movie. So everything that comes out that's like a remake in 2022, like I'm afraid that this is this is gonna happen. And then, but Breaking Bad, the Saul universe did not move, and it's notable. I mean, it's different from other things we see on TV, and it has a perspective. To say race is not that important is also a perspective. You could say that that's like the true perspective, or that's the non-political perspective, but it is a perspective, and I think we should acknowledge that is like that is a worldview. But I think it's the correct worldview, and you think it's the correct worldview too. But it is. I don't think we should just say, oh, that's the neutral thing. It's like, it's our opinion,
Right,
and
right. I know
we
you're
think
making the argument that there basically is no neutral point of view. Like if
well,
you attempt to take a neutral point of view, that itself is a political stance.
no, not exactly. It's like you're trying to get everyone thinks that they're trying to get at truth, right? Like the people who make whatever show, think of the wokest show you can imagine. They think they're going to get truth, if not literal truth, and some deeper truth about the world. And of all the people's different truths, one of them is going to be correct, right? It's like, maybe like out of like 1,000 different views on race in America or whatever. Um, and I think the Breaking Bad view on like race and gender is closer to truth, and I think you agree with us. But I don't think we can say that that is the view that happens to be the true one is the one that's non-political, right? That's not how I look at it. It
Well,
doesn't
I guess
make it a non-political view.
basically what we seem to be disagreeing over is you seem to be trying hard to say that the show is making a political statement here, and I'm trying to
No,
take
no,
the
I
view
don't
that
think I don't think I don't think so. I don't think, like what the producer intended. I don't think so. I think it reflects a conservative, which the conservative view is often, does not give a lot of thought to race or
I think it's just that they had a kind of a pre-planned story that they were trying to tell. That's one of the things that's always characterized Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. You feel like it's all pretty tightly plotted from the beginning, and they're just kind of sticking to their guns. And for all I know, in that world, there's systemic injustice in the criminal justice system. Asians probably still aren't allowed to get into Harvard the same way other races are. Uh, it's just not part of the story they're focusing on.
if you have, yes, but there's all kinds of things the show does have commentary on. Like there's commentary on like like old people. There's a lot of commentary on the legal system that I hope maybe we could still get to. There's commentary, I think, on American business, on American and Mexican institutions. Well, maybe that's like that maybe that's not, maybe that's just the background. Um, you know there's a lot of, there's a lot there. And a nursing home, and like people taking advantage of elders, and like there's so there's a lot there, and there's a lot of time, and it's a choice not to have a racially diverse cast, which is not forced in most cases. I think the Gus Fring, I think there's artificial diversity put in there, the Gus Fring gang. But it's a choice. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm
It
not
just seems
sure
to me like you're trying kind of hard to take your favorite shows and say that the guys making them are on the same side as you politically.
I think that I don't think I'm trying hard. I think that a leftist who's I think this is a I think that this is a I think this is notable. I think to look at it's like a Christian. It's like, okay, if you're reading a book from the Middle Ages, and like every book in the Middle Ages starts with like a peen to the Holy Spirit and God, and then you find a book that doesn't do that and just talks about geometry or whatever. I don't know if books actually did this, but I'm just using this as an example. Like that is part of the being interested in the book. That is part of sort of that is worth sort of discussing, right?
Well, you know, maybe. Uh, I just don't think it's a major part of it all. And like if the news came out in some article that Vince Gilligan next year Vince Gilligan is marching in like in a BLM protest, I'd be like, whatever. That's a little bit surprising, but
Okay,
not
I would be very surprised. Maybe that's our difference. I would be very surprised. I would
okay.
be very
I would be somewhat surprised, but to me, it's just
What about Women's March? Would you be more surprised or less than a BLM one?
maybe I don't know, pretty similarly. But look, here are the facts. I guess I agree
Yeah.
with you that the kind of that there is no particular PC or woke worldview expressed in the show. The few times where it does mention that, it's in like a satirical context. So look, I agree with you that the show's politics, in a sense, are a bit to the
Yes.
right of the average show these days.
Yeah. Okay, yes, and we've probably spent because of our, I guess, disagreement. We've maybe spent, or I don't even know if we have much of a disagreement. We've spent a lot more time on this than I think that the race issue in itself uh, merits, relative to how important it is in the show. Um, but yeah, I think it's there, and yeah, I think it's interesting. So the yeah, so the legal profession thing, to switch topics. Um, Tell me, do you have thoughts on this? I could tell you what I think, but I think this show does have a message on that too.
Oh, why don't you go ahead then?
So there is so our society, and this is something that I've always sort of thought gives a lot of power to lawyers, right? Lawyers, like, a lot of the legal system rests on good faith and people following the rules. Like, oh, you have discovery, so you don't lie. You actually give them the documents. They want. I don't know. I never practiced law, but my impression from talking to lawyers and being to law school is like people take these all these rules seriously, right? Like the average lawyer, even if he could like burn documents, and that could be like in their self-interest, they tend not to do that, right? And I think that's reflected in the show, that these people do have an ethical code. And Jimmy, when I think when Chuck says he's a monkey with a machine gun, we can debate whether Jimmy is a monkey, right, or a chimp or whatever he is. But the machine gun part, I think, is true. That if you have an unethical lawyer, they can do a lot of mischief.
Yeah.
And it's saying something about society that most lawyers don't do this and are, generally well-meaning people. And this is also, I mean, again, this is maybe a thing like I would think is political, and you would say no, it's just the background. But I would say no, it has a story about American institutions, and the upper class, whatever, the professional class that runs them. Um, but yeah, and Jimmy is sort of, his power comes from like his charisma and also his lack of moral scruples with this power that society gives lawyers.
Right. Yeah. I think that the show does kind of take a kind of an optimistic view of lawyers, and it kind of takes care to show us that most lawyers have a certain decency, no matter which side they're on. It's kind of nice. I especially like the times when it shows us the interactions between the prosecution and the defense,
Yeah,
and it always, especially like when you see Jimmy interacting with Bill the prosecutor, the guy who's always having trouble with the vending machine,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and you see that there's like a mutual respect between the sides here, and it's in some ways it's kind of a, I mean, it's a view of the legal system, of the adversarial system, that might strike some people as naive. Like the show shows it like, oh yeah, we're the adversarial system. We're all we're pitted against each other, but it's just so the truth can emerge. We're all working on the same project at the end of the day. We're all officers of the court. Uh,
yeah.
and that's actually an attitude that you see expressed in kind of, I think, the most recent episode, where suddenly Jimmy shows up to court and
Mm,
everybody is cold to him.
yes.
Security guard, and then the clerk,
Yeah,
and
he
then
bribes.
Bill, everybody. And it's basically because everybody thinks that he's kind of broken the code, that he's failed his duties as an officer of the court. They're all universally pissed at him because they thought that they were embarked on some like common noble project that he betrayed.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a good point. Like, so there's like, okay, so there's a sense of fair play, right? You try to get your client, the best deal possible. You try to get them off, um, but then you don't cross the line, which is lever. Now, so here's something interesting. So I went back and I watched the first episode where uh, Jimmy appears in Breaking Bad. Um, and do you remember that? Like, so he's defending Badger, right?
Yep.
So Badger gets picked up, um, and Walt comes in, pretends to be Badger's uncle or something, and Walt offers him $10,000, offers Jimmy $10,000 to not to basically like just make sure Badger doesn't talk. He doesn't care what happens to Badger,
Yeah.
but it's basically he doesn't want him to talk because of Walter White. And it doesn't show Jimmy rejecting the bribe, but he goes back to the car, and then Jesse is like, that guy rejected a bribe, like that guy,
Yeah.
like Saul. So like there's still a line that even Saul in Breaking Bad does not like when he's defending a client.
Yeah.
He's got some loyalty to the client. He's not just going to take a
Yeah.
bribe.
That, that it's an interesting point about Jimmy, and I'll say an interesting point about Saul. Like that is a line that we never see Saul cross. Like to him, that there is one important professional rule that is unbreakable. You don't betray your client. And Saul, I don't think that Saul ever crosses that line. I think that Saul, even when he becomes Saul, he always does think like, hey, if we've entered into an official arrangement and I am representing you, that's really my job. That's really my goal. So he always cares about his client's interest, no matter how bad he gets.
Does he ever have an is it ever in his interest though to not besides rejecting that bribe? I mean, is there are there a lot of instances where he has that opportunity? Because usually he has a self-interested reason for maintaining a reputation. Though sometimes the best way to maintain a reputation is to actually be the person. Right. So he wants a reputation for being the guy who's always going to be loyal to his clients. The best way to do that, I guess, is to actually be loyal to your clients, no matter what.
Yeah, but there are ways. You could make a sacrifice here or there. I had the impression that this is really a matter of principle. It's like the one principle that Saul has left.
Yeah. I think you're right. And he's always one thing I think that makes him maybe not the worst person in the world and that gives him a redeeming quality is that if he doesn't take advantage of the very vulnerable, like the elderly, when he goes back to Marco, who you don't remember, but hopefully you go back and watch. He says, I'm working in elder law now, and then Marco is like, oh, you're ripping off old people, that's awesome. He's like, no, not ripping them off, trying to help them, and so he doesn't take advantage of old people. People like they feel sorry for people. Like Mike has this too. So who he doesn't remember, that guy with the Hummer, the guy who's selling drugs to selling the whatever Oxycontin or whatever it is to Nacho. He could rob that guy easily or do something. Nobody does because he's so pathetic. Everyone feels bad. Nacho does steal his baseball cards, but that's the extent of it. And that guy actually ends up he ends up not getting he ends up okay in the show because nobody wants to hurt him because he's so pathetic. And so there's a lot of this. This is a recruit. So the client, when he comes to Jimmy, is in a vulnerable state. He doesn't know anything about the law. He's a criminal, right? And so that would just be taking advantage of someone, and that's wrong. That's and the people he rips off. There's always there are people who deserve it. So the guy, there's this one scene where they're always so. By the way, I went back and I saw the guy who the first guy you mentioned, the first guy they ripped off, the guy for the drinks. He was in Breaking Bad too. Do you remember this?
No, I know they keep doing that.
So do you remember the scene where Walt just sees this jerk go into the gas station and he's talking on his phone. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm so awesome. I made $1 million today or whatever." And then Walt just sets his car on fire.
No, I don't remember.
His license plate is Ken Wins. But it was that guy. Yeah. So that's the same guy. It was. I had to go back and watch. It was the same guy. Yeah, what are the odds? It's like some of these coincidences are too.
It's a small world.
It's too much. Yeah. So, but it's funny. It's the same guy, but he plays that role in both shows. He's the Mark who deserves to be ripped off, and it's not like he's a bad guy. I don't know. He doesn't do anything. He's just arrogant and he's rich. He's rich enough, and he's powerful. He being robbed is not gonna destroy his life or something. And then Walt just blows up his car, and this is such a funny scene because it's just Walt has no relationship. He just sees him and he's annoying. And he's just talking a lot on his cell phone. So he goes and just blows up his car. just thought that was like such a funny. It was like a very very Walt thing to do. It's like
Yeah.
I hate this guy and I want to blow up his car. Yeah, so like the things that annoy him about people are, and the actions he takes based on that is really funny. But yeah, the point is that's the flip side of that. There's like some people who are either too weak or like too sympathetic to deserve being taken advantage of, and then there's these marks who like sort of have it coming to them. Either they're in the game or they're just like I guess
Right.
finance bros or jerks of some
I
kind.
mean, it's kind of like the rule in comedy. It's like Jimmy seems to follow the rule from comedy that you punch up, you never punch down, and
Yeah,
that's kind of one of the principles that sticks with him.
yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right, and I think this is the difference between like the semi bad people and the really bad people. So remember when Hector, when Mike robs the truck from the cartel, and then he asked Nacho what happened, and Hector shot the guy in the face. Do you remember? There was a good Samaritan.
Yeah, yeah,
And then we don't see this, but that's what he says. And so that's Hector. Hector and Lalo. Lalo kills some random guy. I forget what the reason is, but he kills somebody who's not in the game.
yeah.
Uh,
You mean the guy at the with the videos he was trying to look at?
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Wheeler
whatever
or something like
Lalo's
that.
original murder case. Yeah, his murder case was. And so yeah, so having this code is what separates the semi bad people for the real. Now with the semi bad people, their semi badness or their unwillingness to I guess follow rules or follow normal people ethics does often get a lot of people in trouble. So like when Walt gets that janitor sent to jail because I don't remember because he had marijuana on him or he was the one he was Walt framed him or let him get framed or something for something, and then he went a few months in jail. And then the other thing. Uh, and then the Mike, when he robs the cartel, that Good Samaritan gets killed, which we just talked about, and the guy gets killed too, the truck driver who because they thought he was in on the robbery. That's where he's trying to snipe. He's trying to snipe Hector, but he can't get the shot. Uh, and so like the lesson is like there's actual consequence. Like these people don't. Mike doesn't want to kill people, right? And Jimmy, Walt doesn't want to frame this guy or whatever. But there's downstream consequences of them, choosing the life of crime, even if they try to do it in an ethical way. It's a balance they cannot maintain. They cannot maintain their way. Like I'm in the criminal world, and I'm just going to do things in a way that doesn't end up harming a lot of innocent people.
Yeah, I think that it reminds me of this famous line from The Wire. A man's got to have a code. I
Uh-huh.
think that is kind of a worldview that Vince Gilligan seems to be exploring at some points. He's trying to reveal to you that some of these characters really do have codes, and he's showing you how they're trying to follow some parts of the code, force them to sacrifice others, and so that's one of the things that we're supposed to watch. Their effort to maintain some kind of code, and I think by the end of everything, the only part of Saul's code that he has left is that you defend the client.
Yeah, that's
And it's a
interesting.
very, it's a very kind of, this is the part of the whole universe that strikes me as most naive is its cheery attitude towards all lawyers.
It's the cheery attitude towards lawyers. Does it? I mean, is it so? Maybe we don't see the lawyer like, but there is like a concept of like the ambulance chaser. We know that's like a prototype. I mean, but so Saul is a lawyer, and Saul is a successful lawyer, so you can't exclude him as like part of the legal profession, right? Um, are there other characters who are like him? No, you're pretty much right. And the way it portrays like American capitalism and like business people too. This is another thing we could have the same discussion we had about race. Like you would say, oh, it's just a background, and I would say, no, it's actually notable and something different than what most people say. Um, I guess I can say that about your lawyer thing too, but I won't. Yeah, we don't have to do
We
that.
don't
But
need to, yeah.
yeah, rehash. But it's um, yeah, the legal profession. Okay, so I guess I did see some things that were a little bit more, maybe not so optimistic. Yeah, like Sandpiper is obviously like a standard like prototypical corporate villain. And it has, it like, and lawyers do stuff like bury each other in like discovery, right? So there's like socially acceptable ways for like lawyers to officially follow the rules. And and so, the Sandpiper case, the fact that it drags on for like 100 years because the lawyers are just like, they can't just get these people their money. And like, this is how Jimmy and Kim justify to themselves, like starting to break the rules, right? In order to get the settlement. I mean, this is, if not lawyers are not bad people, maybe, the rules they follow often lead to pathological results. Like you have this, class action suit, and, the old people die before they ever get their money, right?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it's the evil is like, it's not, it's like, this is why the part of the why this, the series are so good. It's like, it's like good people, and then this is like a left wing sort of a left wing idea too, but it's true in this case. It's like good people following rules, doing the things that incentives make sense in their incentive structure, but lead to bad results because there's something
What do you call it? Systemic injustice?
systemic injustice. Yes, it's a broken system. There's misaligned incentives, right? This is I don't know. Maybe it's giving liberals and like the liberal viewer race too much credit to say that that's what they're doing. I mean, I think that's the most sophisticated version of
I mean, look,
what they.
I think it is. I think that is part of the show's worldview. I think you're right. It's trying to show us how it makes most of the agents in the legal system basically well-meaning, for the most
Yeah,
part, and it shows us how this can lead to pathological results sometimes.
yeah. I think that's right, and they're trying to do it like they can tell the difference between like a criminal who really deserves it and like a kid who just made like a bad mistake. Like it's like the different actors like can tell the difference. I think that's realistic too. But yeah,
One thing that's kind of interesting about all this is like the interactions with the prosecutors. Here's one thing I'm not completely sure, but this I'm not sure how realistic the show is here because every time we see Jimmy negotiating with the prosecutor, it's like, oh, the kid, he's just a kid. What he did wasn't that bad, and the prosecutors. We never really get the impression that the prosecutors are trying to throw the book at anyone. And this, I'm not sure how realistic that is, because I think that my impression is that in the real world, there are plenty of times when the prosecutors don't care if he's a good kid, and they just want to get as many convictions as possible, throw
Mhm.
as many charges as possible.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's true because my understanding is the legal system is somewhat overburdened, and they're making these choices over all the time as to like who needs to be locked up for the cause of public safety and who doesn't. Um, Yeah, I don't think because actually throwing the book, if you've ever looked at laws, it's like, oh, literally like up to like 3 years in prison. I mean, laws are really often written in ways that if you really wanted to throw the book at everyone, you actually could. I don't think they do that, and maybe in part because like there's only so many hours of the day, and you can't put everyone in prison for life. You don't have like the budgets or anything to actually do that. So yeah, I don't know. I have no experience in the criminal justice system, and so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know a ton about it. Maybe that really is how prosecutors are. Maybe prosecutors really are swayed sometimes when you tell them he's a good kid.
Yeah, well, I mean, they must be because there must be some interaction. There must be back and forth between the prosecution and defense, and you figure the public defenders. I mean, they have a collaborative relationship with. You're right. That's another thing about Jimmy. He does work for his he does work hard for his clients. Um, Okay. Yeah, this was great. I mean, if people have made it this far, and you haven't seen Breaking Bad or you haven't seen Saul, and you listen to all those spoilers for some reason, if your memory is as bad as mine, you're not going to remember anything we said. You're going to have the general impressions of what we talked about, but you're not going to remember details of who killed who or who died when or whatever. So if you made it this far and you haven't watched this show, I would recommend you still do that. Anything else that you think we should talk about the Breaking Bad universe before I let you go?
No, we got plenty of time left. I mean,
Yeah.
in the future episodes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Chris, it's been fun. Until next time.
Yep, good talking to you.